A remarkable show of defiance. Iranian women burning their headscarves in the street. These are the largest anti-government demonstrations the nation has seen in many years. 8 people have been killed, including a police officer and a pro-government militia member. Social media has been awash with videos of protests in more than 50 towns and cities across Iran, leading to a government blackout of WhatsApp and Instagram. The unrest has been sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini, a young woman arrested in Tehran by the notorious morality police for wearing her headscarf incorrectly. At the UN General Assembly, President Biden voiced his support.
Today, we stand with the brave citizens and the brave women of Iran who right now are demonstrating to secure their basic rights.
But Iran's president hit back, bemoaning what he called Western double standards on human rights. In Tehran today, a show of strength. Military hardware paraded to mark the anniversary of the war with Iraq, lashing out at external enemies. All the while, the regime's internal critics continue to call for change. Well, Holly Dargres is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank with a focus on Iran, and she joins me now from Washington, D.C. Holly Dargres, the bravery of these protesters is really extraordinary. Do you think the regime will succeed in brutally suppressing the protests, or are there the seeds of a revolution here?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. Unfortunately, as extraordinary as these protests are, the Islamic Republic will crack down and has already been cracking down, as we've seen in the past few days. And they use internet shutdowns as a guise to actually cover some of the brutality that they will be using. And it's unfortunate. Instagram is currently banned in the country. WhatsApp's banned. Mobile internet no longer works, and home internet is throttled. And so some of what's been trickling out has been incredible footage, but it will probably be a few days before we really understand how bad things are in the coming days.
But will people, so people won't be able to get out the sort of brutality on the internet, but will protesters, will it fade away as it did with the fuel protests? Or could there be a sort of new movement here begun?
Well, the fuel protests you're talking about, the November 2019 protests in which security forces arrested and killed thousands, that the fuel itself started the protests, but the reality is that Iranians were fed up. They're fed up with the status quo, with mismanagement, with corruption, with the Islamic Republic itself. And we've been seeing protests since then. This is the most significant since 2019, but protests have been normalized in Iran because Iranians want change in their country. They're fed up. And the fact that you're seeing Iranian women cut their hair, remove their headscarves, burn their headscarves, which is a symbol of the Islamic Republic and its repression, is really telling of how fed up they are. And of course, the chants themselves.
So this is about much more than the hijab. The hijab is the symbol, but will they get those freedoms they're asking for? Can you see a point where something changes here?
One would hope that something has to give, but the reality is the Islamic Republic is an authoritarian government, and authoritarian governments do not respond to protests. They crack down on them, and they will further repress the people. There may be some space for some movement. Maybe in the coming weeks, there might not be as many morality police in the streets, but at the end of the day, when they need to crack down, they will crack down. And I should add that the Supreme Leader himself has given this blessing to authorities. In just a couple months prior, he said that the country needed to be cracked down on 1981 style. 1981 was a year when there were mass executions and arrests made in the country at the beginning of the Islamic Republic. So when you have the Supreme Leader himself endorsing this behavior, it really tells you that the realities on the ground will not change.
I mean, that sounds really desperate and a pretty bleak outlook. So how should the West respond? We've had the US imposing, putting the morality police on a sanctions blacklist. What more can the West do to put pressure here?
Well, I think for one thing, condemnation's important. I was pleasantly surprised to see US President Joe Biden mention the situation in Iran, although he did not mention Masa Amini by name. But for him to have made that gesture was progress, in my opinion. Um, US President Joe Biden and his administration has been very slow to react to protests in the past. And so I'd like to see more condemnation, especially from the remaining signatories to the Iran nuclear agreement, who are now trying to revive the deal. So we should be seeing that. I would also like to see more pressure on internet freedom. Internet and social media is the only way for Iranians to get their voices heard in the outside world. So these are some of the things that should be discussed and pushed for.
Holly Douglas, thank you very much for joining us. Krish.